What if the most dangerous moment in your spiritual life isn't before you pray, but after? You bow your head. You pour your heart out to God, asking for guidance, healing, and breakthrough. For a moment, peace fills your heart. But then something subtle happens that many believers never notice. The battle doesn't end when the prayer ends. In many ways, it actually begins there. Prayer invites God into your situation. But what you do afterward determines whether your faith grows stronger or slowly begins to weaken. Many people pray sincerely, yet unknowingly make choices that block the very answers they asked God for. Today we're going to talk about 5 mistakes you should never make after praying, mistakes that can quietly delay your breakthrough. But the first mistake is something many believers do without even realizing it. Chapter 1. Returning to fear and doubt. The first mistake you must never make after praying is returning to fear and doubt. It's praying with faith and then walking away as if your prayer was only words in the air. The Bible says in James 1:6, "When you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." Think about Peter stepping out of the boat toward Jesus. As long as his eyes stayed on Christ, he walked on water. But the moment he focused on the storm, he began to sink. Many believers do the same thing today. They pray for peace and help, but minutes later they focus on the problem again instead of trusting the God who heard their prayer. And the next mistake is just as common. Chapter 2. Rushing ahead without waiting for God. The second mistake is rushing ahead without waiting for God's direction. Prayer is not only about talking to God, it's also about listening. Yet many people pray for guidance and then immediately make decisions driven by impatience. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Waiting on God can feel uncomfortable. Silence can feel uncertain, but impatience often leads to mistakes. King Saul once grew tired of waiting for Samuel and decided to take matters into his own hands. That decision cost him dearly. Sometimes the greatest act of faith after praying is simply waiting. But there's another mistake many people overlook. Chapter 3. Returning to the same habits. The third mistake is going back to the same habits and environments that created the problem you prayed about. Imagine asking God to free you from temptation, but then returning to the same situations that weaken your spirit. Jesus warned about this in Matthew 12:45, describing a spirit leaving a person only to return and find the house empty and unguarded. Prayer opens the door for change, but your daily choices determine whether that change actually takes root. And many believers make another mistake that creates confusion in their faith. Chapter 4. Seeking people's approval instead of God's voice. The fourth mistake is seeking validation from people instead of trusting the voice of God. Sometimes after praying, you feel a quiet conviction in your heart. You sense the direction God is leading you. But instead of trusting that guidance, you begin asking everyone around you what they think. You search for approval from friends, family, or social media. But God often calls people to steps that others won't understand. Think about Abraham. When God told him to leave everything familiar and go to a land he had never seen, it required faith, not public approval. And the final mistake reveals whether you truly trust God. Chapter 5. Forgetting gratitude after prayer. The fifth mistake is forgetting gratitude after you pray. Gratitude is the language of trust. The Apostle Paul wrote in Philippians 4:6, "Present your requests to God with thanksgiving." Yet many people only pray when they need something. Once the prayer ends, they move on without thanking God for what He has already done. Gratitude shifts your heart from anxiety to faith. When you thank God before the answer arrives, you are declaring that you trust Him completely. What happens after prayer matters. So remember this: after you pray, guard your faith. Wait for God's direction. Walk away from habits that weaken your spirit. Trust God's voice more than people's opinions. And live with gratitude as if the answer is already on its way. Because prayer is not just words, it's a partnership with the living God. And here's the truth many believers overlook. The moments after your prayer may determine whether your breakthrough arrives or quietly slips away. So the next time you finish praying and lift your head, ask yourself one question. Will you walk in the same old patterns, or will you live like someone who truly believes God has heard you? If this message spoke to you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you.